Lost Israel's further country. In the apocryphal book of 2nd Esdras 13, verses 40 through 45, we read, "These are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hosea the king, whom Salmaneser the king of Assyria led away captive. And he led them over the waters, and so came they into another land. But they took this counsel among themselves, that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country, where never mankind dwelt. And they entered into Euphrates by the narrow passages of the river, for through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half. And the same region is called Arsareth." This fascinating passage cannot be classified as a mere prophecy, subject perhaps to some later divine modification, but an actual historical account after the fact of the location of the tribes of the house of Israel many years after their forced exile by Assyria. Where is this further country that is defined as being an open, unsettled territory? This description automatically discounts the lands to the south and east of the Israel tribe's last known locations in the upper reaches of the Assyrian Empire. Could they have instead migrated north and west? We know for certain at least 3 locations where the tribes of the house of Israel were first settled by the Assyrians. The book of 2 Kings 17 verse 6 states, "In the 9th year of Hosea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried Israel away into Assyria, and placed them in Halah and Habor by the river Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes." The first 2 locations are in the far northern region of Mesopotamia. At various times controlled by Assyria, Halah was 12 miles north of Nineveh on the Kosor River, a tributary of the Tigris River. Habor, or Gozan, is modern Tel Halaf on the upper course of the Euphrates, in a broad geographical area known as Aram Anatolia. In contrast, the term cities of the Medes refers to places such as Ragiz in today's northwestern Iran far to the east, which is cited in the apocryphal Book of Tobit. Esdras informs us that the 10 tribes did not remain in these locations. The areas to the north of Assyria proper were very rugged, mountainous territory where travel was often difficult. Yet there were definite pathways out of the area. An interesting look at these natural migratory routes appeared in the Bulletin of the Middle Eastern Culture Center in Japan, Volume 10, 1998. The geography of northern Assyria can be described as a series of mountain ranges and intermontane plains, they said, that is characterized as long, narrow valleys surrounded by nearly impassable mountains. With such imposing mountains blocking travel, there were 2 main river valleys that the migrating lost tribes had to choose from. The, quote, "the Aras and upper Euphrates valleys together formed the main east-west corridor between eastern Anatolia and the annexed Transcaucasia," unquote, from the Bulletin, page 138 and 139. Both of these escape routes led to the Caucasus Mountain region, the gateway to Europe. In fact, the same scholarly source informs us, quote, "Archaeological records suggest that natural route was used by nomadic tribes," unquote. Historical records enlighten us, for example, that the tribes fleeing Assyrians had taken that exact route as far back as 1112 BC. Assyrian records state that during the reign of Tiglath-Pileser I, the Assyrian Tukulti-Apal-Esarra, who reigned 1115 to 1077 BC, a military campaign in Anatolia resulted in the defeat of local tribes, whereupon the defeated warriors retreated to the safety of the Black Sea region. The Assyrians referred to the Black Sea area bordering the Caucasus Mountains as the Upper Sea and as the Upper Sea of the West. The Black Sea is part of southeastern Europe. Is this Assyrian record implying that some or all of these tribes escaped from Anatolia into Europe? Of additional interest is the phrase used by Esdras, quoted above, describing a geographic detail of their direction of travel. quote, they entered into Euphrates by the narrow passages of the river, unquote. This indicates the upper northern course of the Euphrates just south of the Caucasus Mountains and designates a northwest direction of travel following the direction of the river. Similarly, we find that in the aforementioned Assyrian inscription, Tiglath-Pileser's troops pursuing defeated tribes toward the Black Sea were said to have crossed the upper course of the Euphrates using possibly the same route traveled by Israel's lost tribes centuries later. If the lost tribes had migrated eastward, then Esdras would have mentioned them crossing the Tigris River rather than the Euphrates. It seems apparent that the prophet was specifically speaking of those Israel tribes settled in Halah and Habor Gozan in the northern reaches of Assyria. Given the geological restrictions of their mountainous region of exile, they would have been most likely to have followed the open geographical pathways toward the Caucasus and Europe. In contrast, those Israelites settled far to the east in the cities of the Medes may in fact have found an easier escape route by migrating eastward beyond the far side of the Caspian Sea towards Afghanistan, and then perhaps northward into Western Asia. So it is likely that there was more than one escape route of the lost tribes of Israel into the further country mentioned by Esdras in his historical account. Esdras also remarked that the lost tribes would leave the multitude of the heathen behind them as they migrated. The word heathen, the Hebrew word goyim, literally means nations and often has a secondary disparaging meaning in reference to the religious practices of non-Hebrews, according to Merriam-Webster's dictionary. In the first sense, Northern Europe was the only extensive geographical area of the known world at that time, which was nearly uninhabited. Secondly, in a pejorative sense, the heathen nations and false religions that Israel was warned against by the prophets were all in the Mideast, Arabia, and Egypt, not in Europe. Is there evidence in Europe of Semitic-speaking peoples arriving in early times? Famed Indo-European scholar V. Gordon Childe commented that, quote, the Indo-European word for axe, peliku, seems to be of Sumero-Akkadian origin. This implies that the metal reached the steppe from the Mesopotamian region, unquote. From his book, The Aryans, A Study of Indo-European Origins, pages 87 and 185 and 6. Similarly, the Latin securia, or battle axe, originated in the Akkadian Sakuru. The early country of Akkad, also known as Chaldea, was the birthplace of Abraham. More recent scholarship has built upon this finding in the Canadian Society for Mesopotamian Studies number 25, published in May 1993. Professor Stuart C. Brown of the Memorial University of Newfoundland postulated the theory that the original Indo-European homeland lay in West Asia in the region of Aram Anatolia. He writes, quote, the earliest recorded Indo-European languages are those from the 2nd millennium BC of Anatolia, unquote, page 12. He quotes two noted Russian linguists, T.V. Gamkridze and V.V. Ivanov, who, quote, argued for an Anatolian homeland by pointing to numerous correspondences between the subgroup and Semitic and Caucasian languages, a phenomenon which also suggests long geographical proximity, unquote, from page 14. These Russian scholars pinpoint the location of the Indo-European homeland, quote, somewhere in the crescent that curves around the southern shores of the Black Sea, south from the Balkan Peninsula, east across ancient Anatolia, and north to the Caucasus Mountains. This location is also suggested by the frequency in Indo-European of loanwords from the Sumerian, Semitic, and Kartvelian or Caucasian languages, unquote, from page 16. Although the original Indo-European homeland is still a matter of scholarly debate, it is significant that a number of important words used in Europe had their origin in Semitic languages found in Anatolia and Chaldea. The biblical Israelites had many connections with both places, as Abraham and his relatives had called both places home, and exiled Israelites were also resettled there before migrating away to the further country recorded by Esdras. It may not be coincidence that the famed Anglo-Saxon Chronicle states that the early Britons originated in Armenia, whose name is derived from the word Aram. You can read about this interesting connection in the Story of Celto-Saxon Israel, Appendix 12, available at links on our website. Many Christians, of course, assume that all of the 10 tribes returned to Canaan after Assyria fell. But leading modern Mideast scholars disagree. Professor Lester Grabbe, in his book Leading Captivity Captive, The Exile as History and Ideology, observed that according to the prophet Isaiah, quote, only members of the southern kingdom, 2-tribe Judah, return, not those from the northern kingdom, the 10-tribe house of Israel. It is also clear that only a small portion of those in captivity return, unquote, from page 96. Similarly, Dr. J. Garrow Duncan, in his book New Light on Hebrew Origins, commented on the era after Israel's exile from Canaan. Quote, as for central Palestine, the ancient realm of Ephraim, it was inhabited by an extremely mixed population of Assyrian settlers who associated themselves with the ancient Israelites. But the center of gravity and the vital forces were elsewhere. They were among the colonies of the diaspora, established among the nations, unquote, from page 97. The Bible gives no indication that the exile from Canaan of the 10 tribes of the house of Israel ever ended. In fact, neither biblical nor secular history records any significant return of the lost tribes of Israel from their Assyrian exile. Where did they go? Language and geographical factors help us to identify Europe as the further country in the historical record of Esdras. Thanks for watching.